Johnny Depp, Narcissist or Empath, Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Now, let's get into the evidence to determine what Johnny Depp is. John Christopher Depp II was born on the 9th of June 1963. He was born in Owensboro, in Kentucky, in the United States of America. He's the youngest of 4 children. He is a famous American actor, producer, musician, and painter. He is the recipient of multiple accolades, including a Golden Globe Award and a Screen Actors Guild Award, in addition to nominations for 3 Academy Awards and 2 BAFTAs. He has had numerous relationships. He was married to Laurie Allison in 1983, divorcing just 2 years later. He was also married, of course, to Amber Heard in 2015, divorcing in 2017. 2 short marriages. Short marriages are often the preserve of a narcissist. However, it could be that Depp is the victim in both instances, and that's why the marriages were so short. He's also had other partners. In the late 1980s, he was engaged to actresses Jennifer Grey and Sherilyn Fenn, and he proposed in 1990 to his Edward Scissorhands co-star, Winona Ryder. He's also had relationships of note with Kate Moss from 1994 to 1997 and Vanessa Paradis from 1998 to 2012. Following the end of his relationship with Vanessa Paradis, Depp began dating actress Amber Heard, with whom he'd starred in The Rum Diary. In 2011, Depp and Heard were married in a civil ceremony in February 2015. It's worth noting there that 4 years had elapsed between their meeting and their marriage. Of course, they swiftly went into a relationship, but there wasn't undue haste with regard to getting married, which is something that's often seen as an indicator in a narcissistic relationship. That indicator is missing on this occasion, which applies, of course, to both sides. Heard filed for divorce in May 2016. Therefore, the marriage lasted barely a year, and she also obtained a temporary restraining order against Depp, alleging in her court declaration that he had been verbally and physically abusive throughout their relationship, usually while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. We will, of course, be examining those allegations in greater detail to make a determination as to what Johnny Depp is. It's worth noting, of course, that if he did engage in those abusive behaviours, and of course that needs to be tested, but if he did, and it was as a consequence of him being under the influence of drugs or alcohol, those are external stressors which are known to diminish emotional empathy. So it could be that where he has engaged in abusive behaviours towards Amber Heard, it was a consequence of an external stressor, as opposed to a need to assert control over her. Of course, it's worth mentioning that Depp has a troubled history with both alcohol and drugs, and we'll be examining that in considerable detail in due course. The habitual drinking and drug-taking demonstrates a sense of entitlement and an abrogation of responsibility for his behaviour, 2 narcissist indicators. Depp denied the claims that she made with regard to the temporary restraining order and alleged that Heard was attempting to secure a premature financial resolution. A settlement was reached in August 2016, and the divorce was finalised in January 2017. Heard then dismissed the restraining order, and Depp and Heard issued a statement saying that their relationship was intensely passionate and at times volatile, but always bound by love. Neither party has made false accusations for financial gain. There was never any intent of physical or emotional harm. Of course, recognizing the volatility of a relationship demonstrates, invariably, the involvement of a narcissist. We have, of course, already established that Amber Heard is a narcissist, and therefore the supposed passion, in inverted commas, and volatility may well purely have originated from her and her behaviours. Or might this be an instance of either 2 narcissists colliding, which increase the volatility, or that it's a situation of a fight back by Johnny Depp as a consequence of the abuse that he was being subjected to, or that his fight back occurred as a consequence of a diminution of his own emotional empathy caused by external stressors, alcohol, drug? Or might it also be that his fight backs against her were actually the presence of an empathic supernova? We will examine further in detail. We will, of course, be returning to the relationships as they are hugely instructive in terms of letting us understand more about what Johnny Depp is. Depp has 2 children, Lily Rose, born in 1999, and Jack, 2002, both born to his former partner Vanessa Paradis. We will return to the nature of romantic relationships in due course, but now let's examine his early days. Depp's parents are John Christopher Depp, a civil engineer, and Betty Sue Palmer, née Wells, his deceased mother, a waitress. Depp was interviewed by Rolling Stone in 2018. This interview is an excellent source of material for determining more about Depp, and I will be repeatedly making reference to it. Depp said, "My mum was born in a fucking holler in eastern Kentucky. Her poor fucking ass was on phenobarbital at 12. That sets a stage for what is clearly going to be a turbulent childhood. Depp grew up the youngest of 4, raised mostly by his mother, Betty Sue. His father was a civil engineer, but was largely absent. They lived first in Kentucky and then Florida, moving, according to Depp, more than 40 times. His mum hurled things, but she was still his mum, he explained in the Rolling Stone interview. Yeah, there were irrational beatings. Maybe it's an ashtray coming your way. Maybe you're going to get clunked with the phone. It was a ghost house. No one talked. I don't think there was ever a way I thought about people, especially women, other than, I can fix them." This quote is telling. First of all, it demonstrates that it's likely that Depp's mother was a narcissist, which means that there's the potential for her genetic predisposition to be passed on to him with regard to creating another narcissist. It also demonstrates, and there'll be more of this shortly, that he existed in a lack of control environment. The formation of a narcissist requires the genetic predisposition towards narcissism allied with a lack of control environment. Please watch my video, What is Narcissism, and What Creates a Narcissist, to understand more in that regard. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody will become a narcissist, despite those 2 points that I've made. It might be that the genetic predisposition is missing, or even if it is not, an intervener can prevent the lack of control environment having an impact upon the child so that they become something else. Typically, the intervener is the other parent, but, as already been noted, his father was largely absent. Therefore, it's likely that any potential intervening factors from him would not occur. The fact that Depp makes reference to the fact that believing with women he can fix them suggests possibly an empathic trait of the desire to heal and to fix, also possibly smacking of codependency. Codependent empaths are those that find huge validation by being with the narcissist, by spending time with the narcissist, by being under the narcissist wing, pouring themselves into the black hole that is the narcissist. As the narcissist takes and takes and takes, the codependent empath gives and gives and gives. So there's a suggestion that that might be a possibility of outcome for Johnny Depp. Depp, in the interview with Rolling Stone, remembers his mother coming home from double shifts at her waitressing job. He would rub her feet as she counted out the coins from her tips. He bought her a small horse farm outside of Lexington, Kentucky, with one of his big first paydays. Might that be the expression of emotional empathy for his mother, or is it financial largesse, a narcissistic manipulation? Betty Sue, I worshipped her, says Depp, but his smile quickly fades. She could be a real bitch on wheels. He mentions that what he said at her 2016 funeral, my mum was maybe the meanest human being I have ever met in my life. Might that be his empathic trait of truth seeker, or does he have a narcissistic need to smear her even in death. His parents made a modest income, and his father's job as a civil engineer forced them to move frequently in Depp's early life, contributing to a lack of control environment, with the actor later telling Oprah Winfrey that he'd moved house maybe 40 times before he reached the age of 15. Is that an exaggeration? Or might that be accurate, and if so, that would again contribute to a lack of control environment? My mum liked to move a lot, he said. One time we moved from one house to the house next door. Depp described the lifestyle as kind of normal for him and his siblings, adding, "We didn't know anything else." Again, it's very common for a victim of a narcissist to not know that there is an alternative world or way of life available to them, which results in the imprinting of that individual and the creation of their addiction to the narcissist. If you'd like to understand more about that addiction, go to the Knowledge Vault, link in the menu bar, and obtain the Addiction Triple Package. In 1997, he recalled to Hello magazine that when he was 12, his parents were always fighting, lack of control environment, and he had hardly any contact with the outside world. Also suggests the absence of potential intervening factors that would shield him from this lack of control environment. However, Depp states, "As soon as I got my guitar, I locked myself in my room every day after school and did nothing but play until I fell asleep." In 1978, when Depp was 15, his parents divorced. Betty Sue remarried a man named Robert Palmer, whom Depp would later describe to USA Today as a really cool guy, who spent about half his life in prison. Interesting, of course, that Depp describes somebody who spent half of his life in prison as a really cool guy, which suggests that the lens of the world that Depp looks through has been somewhat skewed as a consequence of the environment within which he grew up. Depp has spoken about his mother saying, "In our house, we were never exposed to any type of safety or security. The only thing to do was stay out of the line of fire. My mother was quite unpredictable. She had the ability to be as cruel as anyone can be with all of us." Depp testified that the violent home life he was brought up in taught him to never recreate the same kind of abuse in his own home later in life. Might this be a revision of history in terms of saying that he learned from it, or is it the case that he has? And there are those, of course, who are victims of abuse who do not go on to abuse anybody else. They recognise how horrible it felt to them, and therefore the presence of their own emotional empathy means that they're not going to behave towards anybody else in a similar way. Depp explained, "I had a very interesting childhood, one that I thought was normal until a certain age. My mom, her feet were on fire, and she had to move, so we moved constantly. So you're always the new kid, and that wasn't ever particularly pleasant." The family moved from Kentucky to Florida when Depp was 7 years old, where they lived in a motel for nearly a year before John Depp found a job. Throughout those years, Depp said that the abuse from his mother was constant, unpredictable, and nobody in the house, not even his father, was spared. Physical violence, physical abuse, that was a constant. We were all somewhat shell-shocked. She'd walk past, you'd shield yourself because you didn't know what would happen, Depp said. She could become quite violent, and she was quite violent, and she was quite cruel, Depp said, chuckling at the memory of his mother's beatings. There was physical abuse, certainly, which could be in the form of an ashtray being flung at you, or you get beat with a high-heeled shoe, or a telephone, or whatever's handy. But Depp said that his mother's physical attacks were easy to handle compared to the psychological abuse she filled their home with. The verbal abuse, the psychological abuse, was almost worse than the beatings. The beatings were just physical pain, the actor added. The physical pain you learn to deal with. You learn to accept it. You learn to deal with it. Betty Sue would insult her children, needling them with comments that would tear them down, including calling Depp's sister by the name of her grandmother, who Betty Sue was well known to despise. Christy, my sister, knew very well that was a deep cut psychologically, emotionally, but you had to take it. You just had to take the pain. Depp himself was born with a defect in the lens of his left eye that resulted in a lazy eye, a defect his mother latched onto. She would call me cockeye, one eye, anything she could get to demean, humiliate. The psychological and emotional abuse, that's what kind of tore us up. From an early age, Depp watched his mother hurl her vitriol at his father, who he says was always a very kind man who was non-confrontational in the face of his wife's violence. There was never one moment, never a moment when my father lost control or attacked my mother or even said a bad thing to my mother. He said his father remained stoic when his mother would go off on a tangent. There were a couple of times it got too far. I could see his eyes welling up as he was staring at her saying nothing. The most he would do, he would punch a wall. Depp recalled being as young as 5 years old and wondering how his father remained calm in the face of his mother's insults. To me, as a 5-year-old boy, I kept wondering, why does he take it? How does he take this? Why doesn't he leave her? But he didn't. He was able to maintain his calm and his composure and his relationship with his children. He was a good man, is a good man, Depp said. The actor claimed that his family had been shell-shocked and that his siblings would instinctively shield themselves when their mother walked past because they didn't know what was going to happen. He was also alleged in court testimony that Depp's father used to beat him with a belt at his mother's behest. In 1978, when Depp was 15 years old, his father cracked and realised he couldn't stand the abuse any longer, packing his bags and leaving the family as he departed for work one morning. Depp said during his testimony that he hadn't even realised his father had left until his mother came home and sensed something had happened. Hours later, my mum came home from work, about 3:30 in the afternoon. She walked in the door and stopped and walked around. She felt something. She said, "Your daddy's gone. He's gone. He's gone." Betty Sue ran to the bedroom to find her husband's closets emptied. She ran into their bedroom and into their closet. She opened the door, and there was his rack of clothing and all his belongings were gone. She was quite upset. Depp drove to his father's work and confronted him. "I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I can't live it anymore," Depp's father told his 15-year-old son. "You're the man now." Those words didn't quite sit well with me. I didn't feel I was ready to hear those words. Depp said his mother went into a very deep, dark depression after his father walked out. One afternoon I'd fallen asleep and woke up and walked into the living room and saw my mother very feebly, almost a slow-motion crawl. I knew something was dreadfully wrong. There was drool coming out of her mouth. Paramedics arrived and brought Betty Sue away to the hospital, where her stomach was pumped. She'd swallowed a multitude of pills to try to commit suicide, he said. Depp said that his mother was never the same after she returned from the hospital. She was a firecracker of a woman, but when she got out of hospital, the depression was so deep she lived on the couch and weighed about 70 pounds, and all that imagery spun into my head. I was deeply upset by that. These recollections about his childhood might be a fabrication. It is the case that if an individual is a narcissist, they will revise history to paint a picture of a childhood that was far less pleasant than it actually was. However, typically, a narcissist will make reference to a troubled childhood, because that demonstrates the presence of a paternal narcissist alongside the lack of control environment. And the narcissist is using the truth of that existence to assert control as an adult over the listener. Depp has been consistent with regard to his recollections of his childhood, and with testimony from elsewhere, it would appear to be the case quite clearly that these events happened, and that he was subjective to an abusive childhood. It does not appear to be the case, although, as I mentioned, this can occur with some narcissists, that the abuse was fabricated. It occurred. This means that it's in likelihood that his mother, based upon all the various behaviours we've heard about her, that she was a narcissist, meaning that the genetic predisposition could have been passed on to Depp. It's also clear that he existed in a lack of control environment, and, with regard to interveners, his father largely soaked up the abuse and didn't replicate it. But whether there was an appropriate intervener, given the fact that Depp explained this was all that he actually knew, that he had very little contact with the outside world, suggests that he was heavily exposed to a lack of control environment, and if, and this is an important if, the genetic predisposition of his mother has been passed down, then in all likelihood that would point towards him becoming a narcissist. This lack of control environment of always moving around, of being subjected to physical abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, is a classic environment for the formation of a narcissist. But it is important to stress the genetic predisposition has to be there, and even though it's clear that his mother was a narcissist, it's not a given that that would have necessarily been passed on to Depp. His father clearly was not a narcissist, and therefore the genetics from his father might have caused the genetic predisposition towards narcissism to be missed. In 1979, at age 15, Depp dropped out of school to pursue a career in music. We will be returning more about his career presently, but there's another aspect of his upbringing that is worth making mention of. Depp is of primarily English descent, with some French, German, Irish and West African ancestry. His surname comes from a French Huguenot immigrant, Pierre Depp, who settled in Virginia around 1700. He is also descended from colonial freedom fighter Elizabeth Key Grinstead, daughter of English planter and member of the Virginia House of Burgess Thomas Key, and a slave woman. In interviews in 2002 and 2011, Depp claimed to have Native American ancestry, saying, "I guess I have some Native American somewhere down the line. My great-grandmother was quite a bit of Native American. She grew up Cherokee or maybe Creek Indian. Makes sense in terms of coming from Kentucky, which is rife with Cherokee and Creek Indian." Depp's claims came under scrutiny when Indian Country Today wrote that Depp had never inquired about his heritage or been recognized as a member of the Cherokee Nation. This led to criticism from the Native American community, as Depp has no documented Native ancestry, and Native community leaders consider him a non-Indian. Depp's choice to portray Tonto, a Native American character in The Lone Ranger, was criticized, along with his choice to name his rock band Tonto's Giant Nuts. These claims with regard to his ancestry could be seen to be exaggeration or even lie, which are narcissistic indicators. Thus, this is the background and early years of Johnny Depp, which certainly paints a picture. In part 3, we will move on to see what happened in his teens and what he did next. Join me there.